Good afternoon, Penny. What's going on, man?
Hey, it's still morning for me. Good afternoon for you. I just finished watching the Everyday Astronaut second part of the Starship SpaceX sort of tour that they did. That thing was really cool.
Nice. Sounds dope, man. Yeah, one second. I am just getting some stuff set up here. My computer screen's being annoying. It's doing this like flickering thing. I gotta figure this out. Anyway, I see Omar coming in. I see Ryan. Good to have you back in the mix here today. Landon in the mix as well. Looks like we are looking pretty good here to have a good crowd and a good conversation today. Let me go ahead and drop you a co-host. All right, perfect. Good morning, Omar. What's going on by you?
Hey, doing good. How are you?
I am doing good as well. Getting into the thick of things here today. Excited to talk about Tesla this week. Got some faces coming back on that haven't been on in a couple weeks as well, which is good. Tesla today is doing pretty well. The stock, they're trading at 187.32. Moving back up 2.5% today, so it's a pretty solid day. Think that they're going to move higher by the end of day as well. So I like the way that it's looking at the moment. But yeah, I'm excited to hear from you. Some more updates on what you've been looking at over the past week. I saw that Berkshire Hathaway trimmed their position, I believe, inside of BYD a little bit further. Maybe they're considering Tesla. Who knows? But yeah, what have you been looking at over the past week in regards to Tesla news, Omar?
Yeah, it's been a pretty crazy time in the automotive world. We had a big sort of dealership hack, but the EV market continues to progress really well. I'm seeing a lot of signs of strong life in the EV market around the world. And Tesla posted some numbers out of China yesterday that were pretty strong. They had I think several thousand more units than last week sold. So that's a good sign. We're now approaching the end of the quarter. In about a week or so, we're going to be getting Tesla's production and deliveries. So I'm expecting stronger numbers compared to last quarter. My number's around 420,000 deliveries. And that's going to be less than last year again, down again year over year, but up sequentially. And, so not so great, but overall doing okay on the core business. You're seeing a lot of other EV makers around the world wind down their EV businesses and actually get out of producing EVs because they just have so much inventory piling up. And so you're seeing a situation where the average incentive on an electric vehicle sold in the United States has risen a lot. For example, Ford Mustang Mach-E last year, average incentive was around $900 in incentives like a discount. This year, it's closer to $9,000. So as they're sort of winding down, sort of getting out of the EV business, decreasing production, they're dumping a lot of cars on the market. There's a lot of excess inventory, more than double the days of supply. And so that's contributing to kind of some of the challenging dynamics in that market. But I think Tesla's doing okay, all things considered. When you really dig down into the numbers, you look at, for example, the Model 3, the Cybertruck, and how those are ramping. I think that they're actually going to do all right, not like the best year ever, obviously, but I think they're going to do all right this year in their core auto business. And I really do believe that EVs are the future of the industry. You can see it in the battery cost declines. You can see it in the growth of people who are just switching and never making the switch back. And though there's a lot of people who want to say, hey, let's not do this, let's slow down, let's stay with gas a little longer, let's maybe do a hybrid, consumers are moving decisively in that direction. But more than anything, I mean, the car's being reinvented. if you're really looking at auto sales and trying to project them far into the future, I don't really think cars are going to be sold the same way they are today in the future. So it may be difficult to make a projection that actually matches reality. We saw a pretty big piece of news from Waymo this morning. Um, so Waymo has been live with their driverless service in Phoenix, Arizona, and in San Francisco and Los Angeles, it's been invite only. So they're now removing the requirement to get an invite code in San Francisco. So anyone in San Francisco will be able to request a ride. So this is a big deal because, yeah, Phoenix, they've launched obviously, but they've never really launched in a high density city with a lot of tourism where anyone can just request a ride. So it'll be interesting to see how they keep up with wait times. But now if you're in San Francisco or in Arizona, download the Waymo app and you can try your first driverless ride. So this technology is just quietly marching forward as very few people kind of pay attention to it. Really, one of the most disruptive technology forces of our time, computers that can move around the world, give us a ride, take us somewhere, or go somewhere on their own. It's progressing, and it's progressing at a pretty exciting rate. And of course, we've got the Tesla Robotaxi unveil coming up on August 8th, and we've got the hands-free FSD waiting for imminent release. I'm really excited for that to go out to everybody. Chuck Cook has been seeing people outside his house testing. So assuming that means we're getting a 12.4.2 soon. But what I'm seeing with this update, right? So, for most cars, it's a driverless future. For Tesla, it's a self-driving present, right? Because you have this self-driving software that's going to drive the car, but it already runs on it today. So you can see this video that I've pinned at the top where, I was in the South Bay area of Los Angeles in Gardena, and I had to go meet my friend in West Hollywood. So this is about a 45-minute drive there and back on a good day, maybe an hour or more if traffic's bad. And you can just see completely hands-free. It drove me there with zero interventions, there and back, which is normal now. So if you're living in Southern California and you have to do these long drives on occasion where you're driving hours in a single day, just making some trip like this, the car can do the entire thing for you today, hands-free. You keep your hands on your lap, you do whatever, and the car will just handle everything. Traffic, 405, cars, turns, navigation. You just tell it where you want to go, you push a button, and it takes you there. So it really is a game-changing product, particularly the hands-free aspect of it. That's what's new. Because with past FSD, it always would ask you every, you know, 30 seconds or so, hey, can you touch the wheel? And it was really kind of complicated how you had to touch it and how you had to kind of pull on it a little. It was really confusing for new users. So now with this hands-free version where anyone can just tap where they want to go, turn it on, and the car takes them there hands-free, I think this is the moment where this really becomes a must-have for ordinary people. So, yeah, the core auto business is doing very well, I think, with EVs around the world, despite some of the challenges you're seeing from Tesla that are making it look like EVs aren't growing as much. When you dig in a little more, you see that it's really related to a product transition and the ramp up of new products. And outside of that, EVs continue to show pretty strong growth. And I believe that Tesla's getting on the other side of that product transition. They have a lot more new Model 3s, a lot more Cybertruck showing up on the road. And then they've got an AI capability that is really like nothing else we've ever seen. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize that they're actually generating more revenue and profits from FSD than ChatGPT. And I think it could actually grow pretty strongly in the future and just continue to stay ahead, especially in terms of earnings, with the massive fleet that they have and the massive installed base they can sell this to. So, yeah, I'm really excited for the 8.8 event. I'm really excited for hands-free FSD to go out to everybody. I think they've got a really game-changing product, and I'm just patient. I see a lot of people say, okay, the stock went up today or the stock went down today. And, what does it mean? I'm not really worried about what happens day to day. I don't really expect the stock to go anywhere. It's kind of been going in circles until interest rates come down at the very earliest. Then, really with Tesla, I think Ron Barron um, put it very well yesterday when they had their letter. I would recommend everybody, go read that about Tesla. And he said, during these periods of underperformance, we typically see that the company goes through sort of a revaluation event at some point, right? And nothing that happens in the interim really matters that much. If you just zoom out on Tesla's stock chart, you'll see this big flat period at the beginning, right? And you can't really see it, but there was a lot of drama during those periods. There were, highs and lows where the stock went down 50% or went up several times, where there was a lot of emotion from bulls and bears. But now, after the revaluation event that happened with S&P 500 inclusion in the Model 3 becoming profitable, it all just kind of looks like a flat line. And I believe that at some point in the future, there will be a revaluation event that makes all of this price action just look flat by comparison. Or, maybe there won't if they can't execute, but that's really kind of my thesis. So I'm not so much worried about day to day price action, but I think one day will come where people will just have to look at this and start factoring in the expected cash flows from the AI side of the business and start factoring in how that lifts up the core auto business and start looking at how the rise of data centers and energy usage plays up their energy storage business. And I believe there will be a revaluation event, and the company will probably need to add a few trillion dollars to its market cap. But until then, we're going to have to be patient, I think. And a lot of the guys who are looking at the thing every day and saying, oh, why to go up today? Why to go down today? They're going to lose patience and they're going to sell. Or when it starts going up, it goes up 20%, 50%. They're going to sell before it goes up, maybe much more than that. So I really think this is something where investors who do well will have to be patient and are really going to have to think about the long term here, which is that self-driving cars are here. Okay? They work, people are using them. It's no longer science fiction, it's real. You can go try one yourself, and I recommend you do because whether you're a Tesla investor or an investor in anything, you need to understand this technology and how it's going to affect every business. So, definitely go take a look. But yeah, I think this is something where it is not easy, right? Someone has to take this technology and they have to scale it up globally. This is really going to be a 10-year effort to replace car ownership with a new era of transportation. And it's not a get rich quick scheme. It's not a sure thing. But, there are very few companies, especially large cap companies, trying something this ambitious, trying something that just seeks to completely transform what the entire business is about. And that's really why I like it. You don't see anybody shooting for that 10x return at your typical Mag 7 companies.
Omar, do you have a sense? You mentioned like the Model 3 ramp and the S&P 500 inclusion as sort of the launching point for the last revaluation event. Would you guess that it's like FSD got a call there, fully released and completely hands-free, like you can go to sleep? Or what's that next moment where we have a revaluation event and we see, Tesla skyrocketing and making previous action look flat again?
Well, of course, We don't know if this is actually going to happen, of course, I'll say, but the last event was really catalyzed by the fact that people expected the Model 3 would never produce any earnings, right? So the market was valuing Tesla as if the company may not have any earnings in the future. And people were saying, well, this valuation is still very rich considering they may not succeed. And a lot of people said you cannot sell a mass market EV profitably. It's just impossible. And it had never been done before. Then once they did it, people had to acknowledge that, okay, they actually are going to have cash flows. So now we need to value that cash flow. We need to value, the growth of that cash flow, their earnings. And then people started to do that. And then things happened like, for example, S&P 500 inclusion. None of the bears were looking at S&P 500 inclusion because you have to be profitable to be in the S&P 500. And they said Tesla will never be profitable. But then it did. So then all those index funds had to buy. It was really kind of a perfect storm that may not ever be replicated in that exact way. But I think really today you have a similar situation where people are just looking entirely at the auto business. And they're looking at the auto business in unusual rate tightening environment, which has not been typical of past decades. And there's uncertainty about what it looks like going forward. And they're not looking at AI, they're not looking at robots, they're not looking at self-driving, they're not looking at licensing. None of these seem real. But, I know Elon a little bit, and this is like kind of the crazy thing about the guy. He just doesn't give up. He just keeps pushing forward. Even when people are laughing at him, they laughed at him about self-driving for years and years, and he just kept doing it. They kept pushing forward, and look at it now. It's doing things that no other self-driving system in the world can do. So I think really it's going to come from A, rates coming down, combined with B, the AI technology getting to the place where it's a must-have technology. You're spurring back sales, the launch into China and Europe, have people buying it there once it becomes available in those markets, plus older customers, adding it to their cars in the US or subscribing. That should also trigger sales of the core automotive business. It should cause sales to accelerate as people are seeking to get cars that can run this technology. I mean, my thesis is basically that this is going to be a technology that people don't want to live without. As, hands-free self-driving becomes common, nobody's going to want a car that doesn't come with that because it's just going to be a much, much worse experience. So that's really what I see. The first thing we really need to look for is rates coming down. The second thing is really the technology taking off and seeing this inflection point it's seeing now.
Omar, do you think that the Waymo announcement in San Francisco, which is almost in Tesla's backyard, do you think that will help kind of light a fire to get FSD out there faster?
I mean, maybe. I think obviously kind of competitively they're making a thing about it, but it's Waymo takes a lot of small steps, a lot of small steps over time. So they've been in San Francisco for many, many years before they opened up to the public, right? And they've been working for a long time towards this, and it's just one step, right? So now they've got to open up, I think, in LA next. That'll be a huge step if they can do that. LA is an even more populated city than San Francisco. So, it's a step forward, but really what we need is FSD in every city around the world open to the public, right? So there's a long, long way to go. We're just getting started in this market. And who has the most competitive economics ultimately will be the determinant of who dominates the market globally. And I look at Tesla, they've got a solution where their COGS is $30,000 today for a base Model 3 that can run FSD. And some people put Waymo's estimates at $300,000. So FSD works all across the country today. No HD mapping required, nothing. Obviously, you have more interventions than Waymo. So, Waymo doesn't require an invite code in San Francisco. Well, guess what? Tesla also Doesn't require an invite code anywhere in North America, in the US and Canada. So, I think the competitive nature of it is good. There is a little bit of a race here. And I think that's positive. Competitive dynamics always push people to, work harder and be more exceptional. But I don't think it's well understood that nobody really has a self-driving system like Tesla's. Well, this is not to put down Waymo's driverless service. It's obviously incredible. I use it all the time instead of an Uber when I can. But what the FSD team has done, they've built something that really no other system can do. No other system can run across the country. No other system has this cost profile. And I think as the market absorbs that and comes to understand really how unique this model is, um, it, it's really, I think, going to be much less competitive than it looks.
Did we have any other hands up there? I saw you start to unmute beforehand, Penny.
Oh, I was just going to respond to Omar earlier. You mentioned one thing about people not wanting to buy the cars without FSD. I feel like I'm already in that position. You were also talking about hands-free rides in Southern California. I went from San Diego to the desert for vacation last week. Both ways, didn't have to touch the controls at all. That's like a 2 hour, 20-minute drive or so each way. So I did almost 5 hours of completely, control-free driving. Pretty wild from my perspective to be doing that.
And
And
once you take a road trip without touching the controls, you'll never want to take a road trip the other way again.
oh, it's like not even the same thing. And at this point, I still have to pay attention to the road. It's still not even the same thing. I can have better conversations with my kids. I can pay more attention to the scenery. It's like just a much less stressful ride when I know that if the person in front of me slams the brakes, like my car's just going to do it for me. I don't even need to worry about it. I absolutely love that. So I already wouldn't buy a car if it doesn't have FSD. And I think the more people that get in and try the software, the more people are going to be in that same position. Like, I just can't even imagine getting a car that I know has no chance in the future of being able to do hands-free drives or have me, sleep in the driver's seat, which is what I hope to do eventually in my Tesla. Go ahead, Yoda. What's up?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, I think between 2017 and 2019, the conviction arbitrage really was hinged on whether Elon would give up on ramping the Model 3. And so between those 3 years, we went from 1,700 in 2017 to over 300,000 Model 3s produced. And I think now, when we look at let's say 2023 to 2025, the information and conviction arbitrage will be hinged on whether Elon can bring full self-driving technology to fruition. And I think, unlike ChatGPT, whereby the access to that beta product is sort of very low barrier, you just need to download the app or go to the website. um, the information arbitrage here is more significant because you have to sort of trial that yourself. And so that really presents a great opportunity, in my opinion, for Tesla owners.
Yeah, Landon. Or yeah.
Hey, I was pretty excited this week to learn more about the logistics of Tesla in a specific thing that's, I think, really amazing for consumers and for Tesla investors, and I'm both. And so I've dealt with consumer rebates and federal tax credits and incentives in the car business for 25 years or whatever. And so I've got a passing understanding of them, and they're very complicated. And, it's government stuff, it's bureaucracy and whatever. And what does Tesla do this week? Tesla first started putting the 2170 sized cylindrical cell in their Model 3 in 2017. And it's an open source kind of patent deal to where not only does Tesla partner with Panasonic here in the US to make those, a Japanese company, but they also have LG Chemical making those in South Korea. And until this week, the upgrade Model 3 did not qualify except for the performance version for the US federal tax credits. And what Tesla has decided to do and come up with some manner of doing is identifying the battery source that goes into a Model 3 long range. And they can tell whether it's the 2170s from Panasonic in Nevada or if it's from LG Chemical South Korea. And the South Korean batteries don't qualify for the tax credit, and the Nevada ones do. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's good enough for these purposes. And so if you're a buyer that makes a lot of money and doesn't qualify for federal tax credits, you can indicate that in your order of a Tesla Model 3 long range. And Tesla will give you one that is a lower cost to Tesla with the LG batteries. And if you do qualify, you can indicate that on your order, and they'll pair you with the VIN from a Nevada battery pack that does qualify. And so they've just taken $7,500 off of one of their freshest new products. And that makes a real difference to consumers. And the cost, the logistics that are involved there reduces Tesla's cost, and that's great for the stock and the cost of goods sold. I'm really impressed to see them doing that after maybe a little stutter step, if I'm negative for a minute, on the Osborning issues, if you want to use that phrase, with the upgrade Model 3 and a potential Model Y in the future. So good on Tesla, really impressive.
Yeah, this is actually a really material point that Landon brought up. So I'm glad he mentioned it. So we had seen that the Model 3 long range qualifies for the point of sale credit now. And this is really significant because, I mean, this is an amazing incentive. You walk into the dealer and they say, "Hey, we've got a car for 47,500." And you pay them 40,000, you walk out of there. And the government pays the other 7,500 right off the top. They just take it off the car. So this is a very powerful incentive, but it requires the batteries to be American made. And so Tesla only had enough American made batteries for the Model Y long range. So the Model Y long range qualified, but only the Model 3 performance qualified, unless you wanted to lease or buy as a business. But now both the Model 3 long range and the Model Y long range qualify. And the way that they've done this is really smart. So they just ask you whether you want to claim the tax credit. And if you do want to claim the tax credit, you get priority on an American made battery. If you don't want to claim the tax credit, let's say because your income is too high, then you get one of the batteries from a country like South Korea, for example, LG, that doesn't qualify. So this will allow them to essentially have many more customers claim the tax credit, while customers that don't need to claim the tax credit, it doesn't make any difference to them. And then somebody said, well, isn't this an issue? Won't the resale value of the car be down if it's a, less qualifying car or something like that? And no, the used tax credit will apply regardless. So the battery sourcing requirements don't apply to the used tax credit. So this new strategy they have of intelligently matching the qualifying battery cars to the people who need the tax credit should allow them to sell many more cars with the EV tax credit. And that's huge news for consumers who can get, I mean, a massive, massive discount, 7,500 off the car.
Ryan, what's going on, man?
Hey guys, how are y'all doing? I think what I've been hearing from Omar, Landon, Penny, you guys have been spot on. Um, I I get one of the things that I was initially thinking was renewable energy as a movement is very clearly taking over, and 10 years from now, it's going to be super obvious that everything that was not powered by renewables was gonna transition. And there's nobody in the world that's leading that movement more than Tesla is. So just like how Amazon pioneered the tidal wave shift to to the adoption of e-commerce. Like Tesla's doing the same. And whether or not there's a quarter or a few months, 1 month or 2 months or 3 months where there's a down tick, over the long run, in retrospect, we're going to look back and the graph is just going to be so clearly up and to the right. Like the adoption of renewable energy, the adoption of e-commerce, like these trends are just super obvious. So with Tesla, like it may seem like the entire automotive industry is apprehensive or scared about the adoption of electric vehicles. In a few years, we're going to look back and see how ridiculous that was. And then as far as the full self-driving technology adoption goes, I live in the greater Phoenix area. I took a ride in a Waymo a couple months ago. I felt that it performed excellently. It felt much more natural than my Model Y does for full self-driving. That being said, like I know that the method that Waymo is taking and the method that Tesla are taking for their self-driving solutions are completely different. So I'm confident that Tesla's approach will be it will make them the long-term winner, because Tesla has this data advantage for real-world driving situations that no other car company has. So if you just if people just think about it for a little bit, or they just listen to Elon on the conference calls, they know that training and that data set of real-world information will power the training for the entire fleet. And also, Tesla is able to make money on the cars that they're selling for that fleet. And they're able to make money they're basically able to monetize the training, because every incremental new customer is helping provide more data for them. And Tesla, it's like people are paying for their cars. So there's just this tremendous reinforcing loop that Tesla has that no other car company has. And it's going to make it so that how can anybody compete, on this data? Nobody can. So it's like there's just so many things that are part of Tesla's business that no other company has the ability to compete at all. Tesla just makes their competition irrelevant. Whether it comes to the data or the ability to manufacture products at scale, or have like a robust charging infrastructure network. There's just like so many different things that stem from Tesla's initial advantage, which is having and recruiting the best talent. Because if they have and recruit the best talent, then like how is anybody outcompeting them on engineering? Nobody can. So over the long term, like we'll just see the fruits of that advantage. And I continue to be excited as an investor. I think, like I have no idea what the stock is going to do in the next year or the next month, but I'm happy to be an investor, and I think the future of Tesla is bright.
We are so on the same page about the best engineers leading to the best outcomes. As long as Tesla continues to recruit the best, I don't see how anyone can catch up. And it's a bit of an extreme example, but like it's a lot easier to drive a car on a track, right? Like in a circle, or within a mapped area, than it is like with my Tesla, where it has no idea where I'm going. I didn't stay within San Francisco. I drove 2.5 hours out of town, right? Like it's going to run into all sorts of different things that it can't possibly expect. And it still does really well. And as you said, like they're gathering so much data, it's going to be impossible to compete with that until someone else gets a bunch of cars out on the road. And I think we're still years away from that at this point. Yoda, what do you got?
Question for Omar. Omar, I know you've driven in Waymo a lot of time, or have rode in Waymo a lot of times. Just wondering, from your perspective, how do they compete with Tesla? Because the unit cost of each of their vehicles is hundreds of thousands of dollars. So when the robo taxi comes out, there will be a huge just a cost gap. So how do they actually compete at scale?
I think the unit economics data that we're seeing can't be right. I highly doubt those cars cost 300,000. We have to remember that that data number came from a former CFO at Uber, not from somebody at Waymo. Um, they also are getting a newer version of the car. The China tax is probably going to affect them, but I think as Tesla investors, it's good for us to look to the competition and see that as like a motivation. I agree that Tesla's likely to win the race, but certainly is not the time to get overly perfectionist, in my opinion. Um, and Omar could probably speak to this better than anyone since he's got 12.4.1. But I think maybe Tesla has become a little bit more letting perfect be the enemy of the good sometimes because of pressure that bears and others have put on Tesla, which I think is unfair.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of what their cost is, let's call it 300,000, let's call it 100,000, let's call it 50,000. I think what they really need to do is lower the cost of the vehicle and get a lot more of them on the road. That's obvious. So they have a plan for this. They did a partnership with a company called Zeekr. They're a subsidiary of Geely. They're a Chinese company, and this new vehicle, which by the way doesn't have any steering wheels or pedals, you can go check it out on their page, the Waymo Zeekr Robotaxi, or I think they call it maybe their Gen 6 vehicle or something. Um, but yeah, so that was supposed to bring down costs a lot. Lower cost vehicle, smaller hardware integrated in more directly. But now we've got these Chinese tariffs of 100%. That's not going to help. But ultimately, let's say they even got the cost down to 100,000 for one of these vehicles. Okay, well, that means for every car Waymo wants to put on the road, they're spending $100,000, and Tesla's actually, making $10,000. They're selling the car to a customer. Then, of course, there's operational overhead associated with it. Someone's got to clean the car. Someone's got to charge the car. Someone's got to, look after the car. Sometimes go get the car. Rarely. So when you look at the full cost of running the service, they're obviously, burning billions of dollars. But they're running the first driverless ride share service, and they're learning a lot. So, ultimately, it's not even about Tesla. They need to compete with two things. They need to compete with Uber, and they need to compete with uh, owning your own car. That's ultimately what they need to replace, owning your own car. So those are the real competitors that they have to worry about. If they can figure out how to be competitive with those, then all the billions they invested, might actually be worth something. So, can it replace Uber? Well, I do like to use it instead of Uber today. The driving is predictable. You get privacy in the car. You can, you know, blast your own music. You can talk shit. You can, really have the space to yourself. So I do prefer it when it's available. But because the service is limited and the wait times are high and it's not available everywhere I want to go, it can't take me everywhere I want to go. It can't yet replace Uber. So step one is how do we get this to a place where it can replace Uber? Then step two is how do we get it to a place where we can replace car ownership? So I'm not sure their business model today scales up to replace Uber or replace car ownership that easily, but I think they're really developing some, gaining a lot of experience running a service like this in the real world. So really, I think we'll need to hear more from them strategically on how they sort of expand this. One move that they could do if I were in charge of the company is figuring out some way to integrate the hardware directly into the cars at the factory level so that you don't have to make the car, send it off somewhere, and then get the self-driving hardware installed. That would speed up the cycle a lot. So really, make an Uber competitor. What Tesla and what others are doing isn't honestly that relevant. You know, Tesla today is kind of complementary to Waymo because Waymo can't sell you something you can use in your car like Tesla has, and Tesla can't sell you something that is driverless like Waymo. So today they're actually complementary. Someone might use Waymo and say, okay, now let me actually buy FSD because I can see, I want to have this technology in my car too. Of course, in the future, they're more of a competitive collision course. They're both trying to do the same thing. But today, they're actually kind of nice complements to each other. I use both. And ultimately, whoever can just deliver the lowest cost per mile will win.
In fact, it's actually been one of the best ways to convince people where Tesla's going to be. Actually, for me, when people doubt that cars can ever drive themselves in the first place, experiencing it, I think, enables them to see that. There's very few people that are then going to get into the nuance of, well, this has LiDAR, that doesn't have LiDAR. And even in that case, you have things like Wave AI that just published, hey, clearly you can make things work without LiDAR end to end with cameras, just like Tesla. Tesla's obviously shown it can work as well. So I think it just comes down to seeing is believing. And the more people take robo taxis, I think the less it becomes a question of are robo taxis possible? And then it's just a question of when will Tesla get there, or is it possible without LiDAR? I think each of those theoretically should reduce the expected risk on Tesla, which theoretically should increase the valuation.
Kristen, how are you doing this morning?
I am good. It is I'm still in France, so it's evening for me, but it's good to be back here and talking with everyone. Yeah, so it sounds like we're talking about LiDAR and Waymo. I mean, I've been in a Waymo before, and it's quite interesting. We're talking about how it's geofenced and LiDAR itself is more expensive. It was what really 70,000. It went down to about 7,500 per unit. But it's interesting. It has to be geofenced, and it's still so expensive. And Tesla's doing it with vision alone, and it's doing so well without that cost. And it's also ramping up manufacturing. I'm looking forward to 8.8 to see what Tesla unveils because it sounds like it's got something good going on, and I'm really excited to see it.
Are we sure that the geofencing isn't just because of the law? Because I do want to make sure that Tesla investors are not disappointed if Tesla comes out with a geofence as well, because I think the California law basically is instructive that you have to have a geofence and you have to have a fallback. Because of that, I wouldn't be surprised if Tesla goes the same route, not because of technical limitations, but just because of the law.
Honestly, there is a lot of restrictions, but it's also in Phoenix, Arizona. So I don't know. I'm maybe Omar or Ryan can speak to that.
Toronto had a geofence.
And what about Phoenix? Does anyone know?
Yeah, all of them, most of the states copied California law.
Is it the law, Meta? I thought that they had high resolution maps and maybe they didn't have maps outside the geofence. Is that not the
Yes.
case?
Getting the maps outside the geofence wouldn't take this many years, right? So realistically, if it was just the lack of maps, you would expect it to be constantly expanding. But it is part of the law. You actually have to say what regions, because in those regions they have to work with the police to tell them how to do it, do the training. There's a whole
I
bunch
mean,
of other
there's no
steps.
law that says your geofence can't be the entire state of California or the entire country.
Correct,
It's
but
really been like they actually have permission to operate in a much wider area than they can, um, than they are currently. But the challenge is okay. I have to get enough cars. I have to keep wait times down. So that's what really requires, and also obviously the mapping. That's what really ends up making that geofence smaller.
no, the biggest one I think is training each district's police training force. So you have to train
No,
each
no, no,
emergency
that's not
service.
really part of it. That's a secondary concern. They need to charge these cars. They need to service them. They need to build Waymo depots in the area. They need to map. There's a lot of operational restrictions that I think are are foremost. And I think the regulatory structure has kind of evolved around that sort of technical situation. But I don't think that it's really, oh, well, we could be operating in a much wider area if it wasn't for the law. It's really operational and technical concerns that keep the area of the service limited.
I agree. Like, obviously, if they had many more cars, they'd be more aggressive in expanding their regions. What I was just saying is for Tesla, they will have to, there will still be friction going region by region as you have to train each region's police force on how to deal with the, what to do when a car's a robotaxi and you need to pull it over.
Shy, how's it going?
What's up, everyone? I love the discussion. Specifically, any kind of ads I want to do. Let me try. You guys all covered some great points. I mean, 8-8 events. I think. So it's interesting because I have an intuition that there's gonna be some kind of partnership that's gonna be announced at that event. I don't know. Maybe that's hopeful thinking. Like for them licensing the FSD, I'm hoping they're gonna announce maybe some large partnerships. But either way. I've been calling out to my private subs group that I do. There's a world where I envision Tesla hitting $300 by next summer, and that's a wild assumption to make for a company that's this size in less than a year to essentially double, like probably 70 or 80%. And why is that? Because I do think the 8-8 event is gonna close the door of any kind of competition in the autonomous driving space, where FSD is comparing a DVD to the VHS system, where FSD is going to make all other autonomous tech look so historic, and not because of like I'm not devaluing the other tech. It's just all autonomous tech requires an embedded map to exist, and FSD really doesn't. That's a key difference. So all other autonomous tech will look prehistoric once FSD is officially launched, and you're gonna have to have like some major big tech companies kind of back up the Mobileye, the Luminar technologies in order to even catch up to the innovation that FSD is getting at. And I just don't think big tech really wants to dump those funds towards that arena rather than just investing in some AI infrastructure, which is what they're all investing in right now. And also, we haven't really talked about it yet, but like what Jensen said on the Nvidia earnings call was so freaking bullish on Tesla. Like what Tesla's doing on autonomous tech. Like Jensen called that out on their earnings call. Like that's like he had no reason to do that. There's no association really with there is somewhat, but not really on Nvidia's earnings call to kind of call out what Tesla's doing with this tech, but he did
Other
anyway.
than the
Like,
fact that Elon's giving him billions of dollars of
yeah,
orders and was
that's
4%
why
of their
that's what I was
revenue.
like. Other than that, I once I said I was like, oh, actually, there is a little connection, but essentially, yeah, maybe it's just greasing the wheel a little more for Elon to keep dumping billions. But again, I just think that $99 a month is gonna make Tesla so much money in the long term, and I really do think that it's inevitable that they're going to license the FSD to all the major OEMs like the GMs, the Toyotas, etc. Similar fashion of you saw what Tesla did with the supercharging stations. I do think that's the next kind of realm will be the FSDs because history doesn't rhyme, but it does often repeats. I think that's what's going to happen with Tesla on the FSD technology. And once that happens, getting those software margins to come into their fundamentals, like it'll juice up those bottom line growth, which will have an earning expansion story. And if everyone knows, like the street and analysts love an earnings and margin expansion story, especially one that's at an inflection point that's not just a one offer, it's a consistent secular earning expansion story, they're gonna love that, and there's gonna be so much FUD towards the name. So that's why like I'm thinking the 8-8 event's gonna be a lot of FSD, and hoping that provides more of a light or what the vision is gonna be like for the next 12 to 24 months on what kind of revenues they're gonna bring in or what the vision is on the FSD. So we get some analyst coverage or they can predict some recurring revenues in that specific realm in their models for the next couple of years. So I'm excited for that event. We're 6 weeks away. And I do think today's light delivery numbers didn't bring Tesla down. We're actually shooting up or I actually haven't seen it last. Yeah, I mean it's up 2%. Like that just shows I'm glad we're not Tesla isn't moving off delivery numbers anymore, or Elon being a CEO anymore. Like it's moving what I believe is solely based on actual innovative tech, and you're seeing that price action today. It does need to clear 188 for it to really break out to 220. But again, I'm just talking. This is a short term. Like long term, Tesla's doing everything you'd want to see, and we're 6 weeks away from a clear inflection catalyst. And I'm really, really excited to see what they're going to talk about.
What gave you the impression that they would have a licensing agreement on 88?
I think that they need to have a. I was trying to think out what wouldn't be a sell the news events on 8/8. So I was like, because I really hope that's not the case. It's typically been like that a little in the past, and I do think this is like the first. It feels like a monumental type of event, and what would make FSD monumental? Not just talking about it, but clearly seeing some licensing partnerships to back it up. So it's all just based on my perception, no facts, no channel checks that I've been reading that have called that out. So I just think that would be the home run component of this 8/8 events, in my opinion.
Right on. Thanks, Shy. Gail, how you doing this morning?
Hey, hey, hello from Austin, Texas. And I'm so glad I know that this space is like coming to an end, but I'm really super glad you let me, talk and share. So 6 days ago, Tesla announced that they're working with state departments of transportation on delivering the best and the lowest cost supercharging. And so this was quote tweeted over like a quote, a post by the Wisconsin Department of Transportation, but they could be working with a lot of other states on this. And I think that's really, really exciting news to me. I think to everybody, just, bringing the cost down of charging. That's going to be a big thing in the future is the cost. What are we going to pay to run our cars since all cars are going to be electric? We need more superchargers and we need to keep the cost reasonable for those people driving. Virginia got 8 more stalls. That's just in this last week. Texas, 16 more stalls right near Starbase. I've been down there and I'm telling you, these are highly desirable places to charge. Very close to where the rocket launches are. And then and also where I live in Austin, 16 more stalls opened up just 2 days ago. And the place where they opened up is only 5 minutes away from the airport. So it just made me think also about like where people will charge, when they're driving or where an autonomous Tesla might charge. Where are they all going to charge at? Italy got 8 more stalls and then 12 more stalls in the UK. So, and also if anyone's listening and they want to join that supercharger community, please let me or Omar know. How about that?
Always a pleasure having you on, Gail. Penny, do you have a comment there?
I was just going to step in and send it to the next person. Go ahead, Wolf.
Yeah, no, I think you've been absolutely killing it, and I love having everybody involved up here on these Tesla shows and chats that we do have. I always like keeping it up, week to week. I feel like there's always something happening in this ecosystem, and you guys talking us through the latest updates is always big, right? It's hard, I think, for people that don't actually have Tesla in their own capacity to understand, all right, well, what has actually changed, right? The car's just driving itself or something like that. But you guys kind of talking through the nag and the other little pieces, right? And it just all kind of leads into pieces. Kim, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share up here?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to add that I was thinking of while all you were talking is you have a whole population of, I think one of the populations that's been hard to get on board is like your boomer generation. I'm Gen X, right? Because it doesn't make sense to us, let's say, to have a car drive for us and give up that control. But I think about the boomer generation aging, it's the largest population that we have in the United States. And the fact that the car could drive them as maybe they become less mobile, right? And they're also one of the wealthiest generations. So there's money there to buy these cars. For example, my father-in-law started losing his eyesight and he has a Tesla, and right now he has to have a driver drive him, right? But once this becomes, fully self-driving where you don't need to pay attention to it necessarily, think of all, the people in the boomer generation as they're aging, like I said, where they become mobile or maybe disabled, people that can't see or can't hear well, just even in the general population. So I think there's this whole other group where there's a lot of, sales that could be made that has been untapped at this point.
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic point. I know anecdotally,
Mostly the people I see driving Teslas in my area, they're tech people and they're younger, right? Millennials, Gen Z, my son Gen Z just bought one. So I think, but you don't see the older populations. As you know, I'm getting one, but I think there's this whole untapped population, like I said.
I know a lot of people who are between the age of like 50 to 70. A lot of those women are super interested in this. Obviously, males too, but I found like women this age are like more potentially more caring of what their parents might need or what their needs could be in the future, and they're just thinking that, okay, if a car could provide them the freedom after they're really immobile, then that would be like a total game changer, and I think it will be. So I think they're right.
I couldn't hear Ryan, FYI.
Oh, okay, no worries. He was agreeing with you. I think for the most part, at least. So
Yeah,
really good
definitely.
points. But yeah. This was a super fun hour as always. I love the updates that we're getting here. I might have to go back and test drive another Tesla soon, see some of the different pieces around the board. But big thank you to Omar and Penny for coasting. Penny, always a great coast to have up here. We do a couple spaces a week together. Make sure you're following him. Penny, you got any other comments on this one before I roll into my next?
No, I mean, I think we hit on all the major points. I'm super excited about 8.8. I feel like we can now focus on that with all of the recent drama behind us. It feels like for the first time, we're not like, I mean, still we have the insurance or the interest rate issue, but aside from that, it doesn't feel like we have a major headwind. And I think that alone is like a really nice feeling as a Tesla investor. We've had a rough year or so, but yeah, I can't wait for that event. I can't wait. Like if Shai's right and they have some kind of partnership, that's just going to be incredible. Even if not, to get a sneak peek at the vehicle, the software, and really just sort of understand more about how they see the coming year as it relates to rolling out robotaxi and FSD. I think that's super exciting. I continue to be excited for every Optimus update. I mean, this sort of like AI robotics stuff is why I got involved in Tesla in the first place. And it feels like we're getting so close to a lot of it really materializing in a major way. So continue to be excited about that.
Beautiful. Thank you so much to Penny and the whole rest of the crew. Great to have you back on, Gail. And of course, Ryan returning. Kristen, hope you had a great travel and trip. Kim, Landon, Meta, Shy, just a really awesome Tesla crew up here that I always appreciate having on. So big thank you to the lot of you. Going to go ahead and jump into this next space now with EMP Money, who we have up here. Been looking forward to our chat since we talked a few weeks ago at this point. We had a space together, but yes, thank you again to the crew. And I think there's a few new folks that are going to go ahead and join up with us on stage here now. And Kristen, I see your message. Okay, perfect. Love to see it across the board. Big thank you to everyone that has been on here. Going to go ahead and get us moving into this next one. AJ, do I have you up here?
Wolf, yes, brother. Can you hear me?
Dude, I'm doing good. How you been? It's good to hear
Yeah,
from
you
you.
too, man. No, excited to be back. We had a pretty awesome chat a few weeks ago, and now we're coming back with some more updates for sure.